Well, hello, everyone. I'm Nick Fortini. I'm the president and publisher of Columbus Business First. I want to thank you for joining us today for our 4th annual LIFT Symposium, Leveraging the Impact of Female Talent. Business First is proud to host the LIFT Symposium in partnership with the Columbus chapter of the Healthcare Businesswomen's Association. And our collective aim in hosting this event is to raise awareness for the HBA and then help advance their mission to achieve gender parity in leadership positions, facilitate career and business connections, and provide effective practices that enable organizations to realize the full potential of their female talent. Now, aside from the business case for achieving gender parity, productivity, talent acquisition and retention, fostering a strong corporate culture, equal opportunity and fairness, among others, research shows there is a correlation between improved gender parity, accelerated business performance, and overall economic growth. This year, we'll be bringing you the LIFT Symposium in 2 installments. Our program today and part 2, which will be held 1 week from today on July 22nd, starting at 8 a.m. And you'll find a link in the chat to register for that second event. 2020 and 2021 will go down in the books as one of the most challenging periods in our lifetime. The devastating economic, societal, physical, and mental health impacts of the pandemic in the United States and globally, particularly on women, has been extensively reported. In today's session, we'll hear about how St. Vincent's Family Services seized the opportunity during the throes of the pandemic to deliver on their mission of providing pediatric behavioral health care to change the lives of children and families, and why they are stronger and better prepared to serve the community as a result. We'll also hear from an impressive group of Central Ohio leaders who will spotlight individual and organizational actions that are being taken in our community to lift each other up and help us rise together. I'd like to thank the members of the HBA that were critical to making this event in this format a reality. Thank you to HBA Columbus LIFT Symposium Chair, Stephanie Henderson, and to LIFT Symposium Incoming Chair, Susan Moss. Thanks to our founding LIFT Symposium Chair, Heather Brode, who once again played a pivotal role in making this year's event a success. Thank you also to Laura Butler, who chairs the Council of Chapter Presidents for HBA's Global Board and has been instrumental in making this event a success in Columbus and across the HBA network. Thank you very much to all of our speakers and our panelists for generously spending your time with us today. And finally, thank you to all the members of this year's LIFT Symposium Planning Committee. Now, this event would not be possible without the support of our sponsors. I'd like to thank our branding sponsors, Cover My Meds, Ohio Health, Quantum Health, and Right Pat Credit Union. Our underwriting sponsor is OSU Wexner Medical Center. Please welcome Amy Ware. She is the Senior Hospital Advisor to the CEO of the James and Director of Administration for the Ohio State University Comprehensive Cancer Center. Amy?
Thank you so much for that nice welcome. I'm thrilled to be here today on behalf of the Ohio State Wexner Medical Center and the James, and welcoming you to the first session of the 2021 LIFT Symposium. As a leading academic health center and NCI designated comprehensive cancer center, Ohio State not only supports, but has made a strong commitment to equitable representation in the workforce and in the advancement of gender equity. We champion diversity in the workplace and are committed to addressing health inequities, whether those are gender-based or determined by other factors such as race, income, ethnicity, or geographical background. Reducing barriers to good health drives us in becoming the model academic health center of the 21st century, improving health not only in Ohio, but across the world. For all these reasons and more, we are so proud to support the LIFT Symposium and women in healthcare today and every day. I'm looking forward to a great session and learning from our presenters and panelists, including our very own Dr. Melman. Thank you so much and enjoy today's session.
Thank you, Amy. And our presenting sponsor this year is Cardinal Health. Please welcome Michelle Holcomb, who is Executive Vice President, Chief Strategy and Business Development Officer, and Executive Sponsor of the Women's Impact Network of Cardinal Health. Michelle?
Thanks, Nick. And hi, everyone, and welcome to session 1 of our LIFT Symposium. As you know, the overarching topic today is leveraging the impact of female talent. I love this topic because it challenges us to listen to the stories and experiences from the past year and learn how we can each learn to lift each other up and rise together to unlock our best selves. And frankly, recover from the last year and a half that's been unlike any other in our lifetimes, as Nick said. I truly believe that we're stronger and more innovative when we all, as individuals and as companies, can really bring our whole selves to work and achieve our full potential. And I'm proud to work for a company that embraces differences and advocates for the inclusion and equity of all people, including women. I personally have benefited greatly from the women trailblazers who have come on the path before me, as well as the men who supported and encouraged us along the way. As a woman that grew up in areas like science and then strategy and deal making, I often experienced firsthand what it was like to be the only or one of the very few women in the room. But no matter what the field, innovation and complex problem solving benefit from a variety of voices at the table. As Nick described, when women who bring unique perspectives, viewpoints, and experiences, when we reduce the bias and contribute at our highest business performance. So as leaders, we must recognize the vast source of talent, creativity, passion, and productivity that can be unleashed through strong programs and a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And our ability to fully leverage our female talent today could be more important than ever as we try to recover from the pandemic. It's been a tough 18 months for all of us. And as the leader of the Cardinal Health Women Employee Resource Group, WIN, as Nick described, I've been especially concerned by the impact that the pandemic has had on women's mental health and our participation in the workforce. Adults, children, men, women have all been feeling more mental health challenges during this time. But the data also shows that women have been disproportionately affected. More women as compared to men are reporting increased signs of depression. And it's not surprising in some ways. Many women, particularly mothers of young children, were furloughed or laid off, or others had to choose between how do I spend the hours between work and helping my kids that were at home and trying to take care of them as daycare centers and schools were closed. As of February of this year, nearly 3 million women had actually left the workforce in the US. That dropped the female participation rate to only 57%, which was the lowest since 1988. It's before I graduated from college. And the return of the female labor force also continues to lag. Experts are estimating that the employment for women may not fully recover to pre-pandemic levels until 2024. And that would be 2 full years after what's predicted for the recovery of men's return. So this shift really implies a need for all employers to invest in effective employee offerings that support mental health and well-being. At Cardinal Health, we have been and will continue to invest in programs like mental health resources, training programs, family support offerings, and now as we all head back to the office, flexible work options. We hope to see more leaders putting resources against attracting and retaining and developing female talent as we drive toward a brighter and faster recovery out of this pandemic. As a close, I want to welcome you again and encourage you to listen to the experiences of our speakers with an open mind and an open heart. Take a few notes of what really resonates with you and look for ways to take what they've learned to inspire yourself and others to create a post-pandemic future where we enable and encourage women to bring our whole selves to work. And let's keep in mind what Shirley Chisholm said. She has some great quotes. As you know, she was the first African-American woman elected to Congress back in 1968. She served 7 terms until 1983 as a rep from New York. Let's not let any talent be wasted just because of our gender. So let's get out there and bring our own talent and make sure we help others bring theirs as well. Thanks, Nick. Back to you.
Thank you, Michelle. As part of our partnership, Columbus Business First is proud to be donating a portion of our sponsorship proceeds to HBA Columbus. So thank you, sponsors, for supporting this event and supporting the HBA. And now it is my pleasure to introduce the HBA's Stephanie Henderson and Laura Butler.
Most ever, record-breaking, milestone, unprecedented. We've heard these words again and again to describe the myriad events we experienced as a global community over the last 18 months. It was one challenging period for the world at large and also for our HBA community. I'm Laura Butler, CEO of Work-Life Consulting, and I'm now in my second term as an HBA Global Board member. My passion with my work has been to support leadership development along with providing people with a diversity of thought mindset. The HBA's focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion is why I believe in the organization. In 2020, our members, volunteers, corporate and media partners, leaders, and staff demonstrated a Herculean effort to quickly pivot, adapt, and deliver, resulting in one of the most productive, successful, and rewarding years for our HBA community. The HBA Board of Directors has identified key metrics of strategic success to achieve by 2022. Number one, to have an expanded reach of the HBA across a community of 40,000 women and men and 200 companies publicly committed to the mission. Number two, to have an increased number of leadership roles being leveraged by over 1,500 HBA members. And three, seek external validation of our impact and influence demonstrated by the 20% of Fortune 500 healthcare companies that have more than one woman in their C-suite. This effort will take all of us working together as a united force for change. Bold, innovative change is needed to create more diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplaces. So allies and advocates, here's your opportunity to make a major impact along this journey. Think about how we all can address those 4 words I mentioned earlier: most ever, record-breaking, milestone, and unprecedented. How will you acknowledge and rise together? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Henderson, Assessment Practice Leader at Leader Onboarding. I am serving my second year as the HBA Chairperson for the LIFT Symposium. Thank you for attending the 2021 LIFT Symposium. The Columbus chapter of the Healthcare Businesswomen's Association has been honored to partner with Columbus Business First for the past 4 years to bring our passion for gender equity in the business of healthcare, and indeed for equity in all workplaces and communities, to you, our community. This year, we have asked our presenters to share what the past year has been like for them, what they've learned, and how that is helping them move forward and define their paths. In 2020, we, the LIFT Committee, along with each of you, learned how to pivot, and that we could. How to not only work with each other in a completely virtual environment, but also how to continue to build on our work of gender equity and inclusiveness we started in 2018. Now, in 2021, we strive to continue to build awareness, gain commitment to action, and act to increase equity and inclusiveness across all dimensions of diversity. Our efforts and commitment to furthering the advancement and impact of women in healthcare crosses all boundaries and includes women and men from all walks of life. Learning from the present and past to forge paths forward, that make a difference is key to our future. I'd like to take a moment to thank a number of people without whom this would not have been possible. Our committee members who ensured that we continue to have excellent presenters and content. The Paths Forward team, Heather Broad, Susan Moss, and Nick Fortini. Acknowledge, lift, rise together. Jennifer Sheely, Tegan Hendershot, Elena Lotozo, Leslie Goss. Stories Are Data, Susan Moss and Alexandra Anarino. Real People, Real Stories, Brooke Curtis, Amy Lammers, Krista Hazen. We'd also like to thank our HBA Columbus Chapter Board, Nick Cole-Mackley, Chelsea Ball, Tegan Hendershot, and Aditi Bhatia. The HBA Midwest Regional Leadership, Catherine Becker and Kathy Relias, as well as the HBA corporate team. Finally, our Columbus Business First partners, especially Nick Fortini, publisher, Steve Hewitt, advertising director and his team, Rick Titus, creative director, and especially Melissa Price, events director, who year after year makes us all look good. We hope you find the sessions as interesting and informative as we have in bringing them together.
Good morning. I'm Heather Broad, career and leadership coach and consultant and founding chair of the annual LIFT Symposium. It is a pleasure to introduce the speakers for our keynote session, Susan Lewis-Kaler and Regina Haynes, interviewed by Cheryl Labens. Susan Lewis-Kaler is a skilled and experienced leader in the mental health and behavioral healthcare community who has served as president and CEO of St. Vincent Family Services since January 2017. She is passionate about serving Central Ohio families and has aligned her life's work to reflect her desire to serve those in need. Regina Haynes is the Chief Clinical Officer at St. Vincent Family Services. She has worked in the behavioral health care field for the last 30 years, during which time she has dedicated her career to advocacy and providing services to children and families. In her current role, Regina is responsible for monitoring and expanding the continuum of services, ensuring that trauma-informed care is a foundation of all service provision. Cheryl Labens joined Grange in 2012 and serves as Chief Risk and Strategy Officer. She is responsible for leading the development of the enterprise's corporate strategy and the ongoing strategic planning and governance processes. We look forward to learning how this team used their strong strategic foundation and principles of trauma-informed care to not merely respond, but renew their approach to the needs of the community, which also continues to inform their path forward. Please welcome Susan, Regina, and Cheryl.
Thanks, Heather. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us today. We're excited to talk a little bit more about the St. Vincent's story and our experience over what has been a pretty amazing last 18 months, as everyone has commented. So we're going to jump right in. And Susan, let's start with you. And can you just tell us a little bit about St. Vincent's, what you do, who you serve, and a little bit about the organization?
Yeah, I'd love to. So St. Vincent Family Services has been around for 143 years. We are located on the Near East Side of Columbus. We started as an orphanage, but we have not been an orphanage for a very long time. We are a pediatric behavioral healthcare agency that serves more than 5,000 youth and families every year. We run 24/7 programming. We have children living with us in a residential therapeutic center, and we have a wide array of services in the community. We serve families in schools, in the community, here in the center. Wherever families need help is where we go. And we have about 175 staff. We're about a $13 million a year operation, and we strive to have trauma-informed care infused in everything we do, from the front door to the back door.
Thanks. So What were you striving for? I think one of the things that happens when we start talking about some of this and we think about the last 18 months, we forget that there was life before the pandemic. And yet I think how organizations were positioned and what they were focused on had something to do or had an impact on how we handled and made it through the pandemic. So can you both talk a little bit about what was the agency's strategic plan that you had going into the pandemic? What were you focused on? And then how did that influence how you faced the pandemic and the challenges that you overcame?
Yes, thank you, Cheryl. I can talk a little bit about it from the clinical perspective. I looked at our clientele about 4 years ago, and we started looking at how we are working with families that are coming in from all over Franklin County and in many cases across the state. And we started doing a little research around what people were coming into us with. And we realized at that point that the one theme that came up every single time we counted to be about 90% of our clients and families coming in came in with some impact of trauma. And at that time, we didn't really know what trauma was. We kind of knew from basically the book lens of trauma, but didn't quite know how to respond to it and or how to serve around it. So we went down the whole path of becoming a trauma-informed organization. And that allowed us to connect with some partners outside of our organization. It was a national council that came. They absolutely looked at every single aspect of our organization. We were interested in the clinical part, but they said, yeah, we can't just address the clinical part. We have to address the physical environment. We have to address every point that touches a client and staff. So that was a strategy that we put in place probably about 5 years ago. And that allowed us to start framing our work. Everything we do, not just the clinical work, but absolutely everything we do around how we take care of our staff, it is absolutely around trauma. So we were able to work with our partners at National Council on Behavioral Health, and they helped us to come up with the working definition for us on what trauma is. And what we learned as we started defining trauma, we knew that there were 3 E's related to trauma. And it was an event that people experienced that had a profound effect on them. So one of the things about trauma is that people have the ability to define it for themselves. I found out early on in the process is that people didn't really resonate with the word trauma. Nobody walked around with a banner saying, hey, I've been traumatized. But people were walking around with a banner saying, I have lived experiences. I have some things that have really shattered my well-being. They shattered how I view life. And we found out that trauma changes our whole worldview. So from the clinical perspective, that's one of the strategies that we absolutely started out with. How do we frame every aspect of our organization under the umbrella of trauma-informed care? All the way from policies, HR perspective, maintenance, how are we repairing broken pieces of furniture? How do people enter our building? How do we greet them? What does a yard look like? Is it warm? Is it welcoming? Some of those very minor things, details, but absolutely impact people with lived experiences. So that started to shape our work, and that actually became a part of our strategic plan. Everything we absolutely did started folding under trauma-informed care umbrella.
Great, it's such a nice way of explaining trauma and also shaping the entire agency around the mission and really solving that. Susan, do you want to talk a little bit about, to Regina's point, what were some of those other aspects of the strategic plan that were all designed to support that mission of addressing trauma?
Yeah, well, in 2020, we were just closing out the first 3 years of that strategic plan where we had infused trauma-informed care in everything. We had the commitment of 2 board members who joined us on that journey. And that meant like every month as we were digging deeper, the board was also coming back around and sharing with the full board, what does this look like? How are we digging deep? So we had momentum. We were really excited about a lot of the turnaround that was happening because we were aligning resources with unmet need and wait lists in the community. We were feeling really good about the momentum. Probably November, December of 19, still feeling good in January. And then as we all know, things changed a bit. And our strategic plan did become the foundation though, our strategy, like we knew that it was working. And so even though things were changing rapidly, we dug deep and relied on that structure. And so from the first moment we started meeting, when the public health notices started coming out, we all in healthcare, right? We were hearing it at the same time as everyone else. We didn't have any more advance notice. I remember the very first call, we all came together at 8 o'clock at night. We didn't know what Zoom was. So we were all on our calls, right? We were in the conference room, we had cell phones. We didn't know Zoom existed. And we came together and began our kind of rapid, like, what does this mean? Where do we go? But from the beginning of the conversation throughout the pandemic, we said, trauma is occurring right now. We feel it, we know it, and it's traumatic for our staff. We have to protect our staff so they can protect the children. And that means telling them, we don't have all the answers. We don't know where this is going, but we promise you, we are on the phone with every public health expert in Columbus, and we're doing the best we can. And so it really did guide us and provide that foundation for everything that we did.
And Cheryl, just to add to that, the one thing when we think of strategy, the one thing we pulled up, I pulled it up and kept it up in front of me, were our core values. We relied on those core values. Susan, we went through months trying to bring life to those core values. What were those behavior words that we were going to use to bring those core values to life? And I think that was that legwork that we did prior to the pandemic hitting that allowed us again to pivot and pull all those pieces in place. We still pull on those core values today. I think that's critical. That's part of our strategy.
Yeah. Thanks, Regina. Yeah, the days before Zoom, no one had heard of it, and now it's a noun and a verb. And so, well, maybe can you guys give a little bit of color? So it's great to hear, about the strategic plan going into the pandemic. What were some of those big challenges, obstacles that you all faced, and then how were you able to pivot from those?
Yeah. Well, I'll start, and then Regina actually focused on the operations of all of it. We were getting ready to launch an electronic health record, and for those of us in healthcare that use an enterprise system like an EHR, that's foundational to our work. We were a completely manual, paper-driven healthcare entity, which kind of blows my mind with the volume of kids and families that we serve. But we had laid the groundwork for a year, and we thought we were ready. We actually had a group of folks who worked on nothing but change management, knowing that flipping from a manual system to an EHR was big, and we wanted to support the team. And we could have never known that the change management we were practicing, would have been needed in a whole different way. But we came together very early on in March when we had to close our school, and send kids home. And when our teachers decided to flip to distance learning, we all came together as a leadership team that very first week and said, are we going to hit the gas and try to launch this EHR? We're really close. We wanted to do it by June. Or should we say it's not the right time, and put that strategy aside to say, we've just got to take care of clients that in our existing way. And the thing I guess I'm most proud about of our team, our whole leadership team, we hit the gas and we said we are going to accelerate it. We have never not had children in our facility. And when the children went home for distance learning, our team never left. And we stood up training, stood up practice sessions. We launched our EHR and learned to do telehealth by April 1st. And I will always admire our team for being brave and strong. And Regina really was on the front lines, kind of making sure everyone had the confidence to do this.
Yeah, I think about those days, and I think about when you are in a trauma response, you many times don't know that you're there. And so I'm very thankful for the adrenaline that was flowing, because we pushed forward and didn't know we had the strength to push forward. And as Susan said, having some resilient staff, because when we were getting word, as she said, as everybody else was too, we were scared. We were scared for our life. So we didn't have time to really have a whole lot of strategy meetings. It was get us out this building. Now, let me remind you, not only did we not know what Zoom was, not only were we using pencil and papers, but we didn't have computers. We didn't have laptops to send people home with. So on top of that, we didn't know how our families, who are already struggling with life experiences, were going to be able to connect with us. We went really and truly by faith. We said to the staff, you gotta get out of the building. We're going to use support, and we can talk about what that support looked like from our partners. We found laptops, right? Get out the building, go take these laptops. And they said, well, how are we going to connect with families? We'll figure that out and call you in about an hour. We can't figure that all really out at the same time. But we found out, we pulled all the resources together. We were talking about how do we make it possible for these families, again, whose children were sent home immediately, didn't get a chance to plan, didn't get a chance to say to their employers, we can't come, we don't know what this means. And mental illness didn't take a break because we had a pandemic to work through. If anything, that dysfunctional, the levels of functionality started to decline because we were put in a spot of operating out of fear. So we had to really think about our staff, number one, because they too were scared, didn't know what resources we were going to use, and it caused our managers to really shine, rise to the top. We created some things we didn't even know we had the power to create in that moment of crisis. And for us, crisis was the biggest opportunity. We learned so much during that time. So on the front end, I think the one thing that kept us together was togetherness. We pulled together every single day. We had a huddle. We had to check in with each other. We needed operations. We needed IT. We needed clinical. We needed strategy. We needed communications folks. We needed every single person that was on our team to rise up, and they did. We needed HR to be there. Every single person that we, again, needed to pull this off, we pulled it off. And talking about trying to implement an electronic health record, that's hard when you're all in the building together. I mean, we had a team of people ready with t-shirts. We had a command center set up. We were gonna be ready. We were gonna answer questions, knock on people's doors if they needed help. None of that happened. But we were able to continue services. our services did not stop. When we could do it by phone, we started by phone until we could get training on Zoom. Nobody had Zoom accounts. Nobody had DoxyMe accounts. We never heard of it before, but we were able to pivot so quickly so that our families did not miss a beat. I don't know if we missed any appointments. So kudos to our staff, but mainly to those families who were committed to healing for their children and for themselves. They made it happen for us.
Yeah, and Cheryl, the one thing I'll add to that, Regina said it beautifully, but we were doing huddles with our leadership team 3 to 4 times a week. We would start every morning, and we were often blurry-eyed because we would start at 8 a.m. and some of us, had at that point had been there till 7 o'clock at night trying to figure out. But what Regina said about our IT guys, they never really felt that they were part of the huddle, to be quite honest, before. They rose to the occasion as HR and operations and logistics. And being in the foxhole together really is the silver lining. We don't huddle 3 or 4 times a week now, but those first 6 months we did. And we leaned on each other and trusted each other. And now we meet, our expanded huddle is every Wednesday morning together. And we will never let that go because it was what held us together and helped us implement strategy. And we're stronger because of it.
That was really, for both of you, that was really well said. And I'll add my editorial comment, even though I'm the interviewer, but just as a member of the board who got to observe, it was really inspiring to see how your team, how both of you, the rest of your team, and the entire staff came together. Because, Regina, as you say, and we're far enough removed from it now that maybe it's hard sometimes to remember how scary those early days were when, we got staff, you have a 24/7 facility, and you've got staff that are, trying to both work sort of personally and through their own, health concerns and all of that. And yet really at the end of the day, the commitment to the children and the families that you serve, it really was very inspiring. And so clearly the agency, you serve a very vulnerable population, and you're experts in mental and behavioral health. And so maybe you can just talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing now that, it is this kind of in between phase as things are starting to return a little bit more to normal. But what are you seeing now in terms of your population that you're serving, your clients, your staff, what's important for other organizations to know and to do with respect to, mental and behavioral health of both associates as well as clients and customers?
One of the things that I can talk a little bit about is, first and foremost, is what I'm seeing now and what we're intentionally paying attention to is staff wellness. That's first and foremost. We are committed. Now, every day is a new day for us. We're in community mental health, right? So every single day is a new day. There is a challenge every single day. We come to work looking for what's the next challenge today? What do we have to face today? Because it's not something that is going to be stagnant. Our clients are coming in, and not only our clients, we ourselves, we have to give ourselves grace to be not okay. We had to stop and slow down to check in with each other. How are we doing? People that we wouldn't typically have checked in on. So what we're seeing now is people still need to be okay. People still need to be given grace. People need to be recognized for the efforts they're making to be okay. One of the things that I remind people of is it's hard for me to separate the pandemic from life. People were already in such high levels living in such high levels of complex trauma already. So for some of them, they were like, yeah, I'm making it through the pandemic, but the pandemic really isn't my biggest issue here. And in some communities, we were struggling. Remember when the pandemic hit, shortly after, there was such a disruption in the community. We had one incident of violence in the community after the other. There was rioting, there was protesting. So before we could really think about how we were going to make it through the pandemic, some of us had a lot bigger issues to fry. People were asking me about, Regina, how do I help my child with depression? Do I choose civil rights over depression? How do I make a decision on what to care for first? And I always slow people down and say, stop. Care for the person. Every single person is different. Every single person will have a different testimony of their lived experience. We don't get the luxury of working through one event. Remember the definition of event, and it could be a series of events. We don't get the luxury of working through one, fully recovering from one before we're hit with another. So when we talk about what we're seeing now people are struggling to get those protective factors in place. If you're wondering how and fast people are going to heal, look at our community. How fast is our community healing? I can tell you how quick is healing based on each of us. Some of us, we see staff coming in, people are tired, families are tired, people are exhausted. I don't know that they always know that it's related to the pandemic, but I don't know that you can always separate it because it's your lived experience. And sometimes when you have been functioning in dysfunction for so long, that becomes your functionality. And then it requires people to try to help you and unpeel that onion of dysfunction so that you'll know what it is you're working with. We are absolutely having young people that are confused. Kids are coming in with more depression. We've had teenagers that are cutting more as a result of that. We're having parents that are saying, I'm just tired. I don't have any more energy to give. Now, remember, we're talking about the population that we work with. I can't speak for population across town, but I'm talking about the folk that's coming into St. Vincent's. I'm talking about our partners who are there in the community working with some of our children and some of the housing subdivisions that we're working in. We have some community partners that we're working with. We're going into the streets. I'm out there at some of the sites seeing what are the babies looking like? What are the parents looking like? Sometimes people just want a person to talk to, somebody to say, you got this. You're doing a good job, Mom. No, you don't have a mental health diagnosis. You don't need to have a mental health diagnosis for me to say, you got this. You're going to be okay. We're going to walk through this. And already when we talk about women, I was very excited to know that this was really about how do we uplift women. At St. Vincent's, a large percent of our parents are females. We have women as head of households. So a lot of the work we're doing is how are we empowering our parents that are coming in? What tools do we need? I am constantly looking at, as we move forward, what are the touch points for our clients? How are we making sure that those touch points are comfortable and we're giving them some satisfaction, taking the pain away from receiving help, helping community. I'm out at churches, I'm out in the community on the weekends, teaching about trauma-informed care because I knew St. Vincent's couldn't do it alone. I can tell you about trauma in these four walls, but we need the community to rally with us. We need every entity, every organization to talk about how as a community we're going to heal. What does it look like to work with children and families in churches, in the community, at the rec center that are experiencing this trauma? So as we move forward, things that we've learned is make sure we have strong partnerships. working with people, embracing what people bring to the table at that moment that they bring it.
Anything to add, Susan? That was awfully powerful, Regina.
I don't have a thing to add except an exclamation point.
That was wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, so talk to us a little bit about, if you gave us the retrospective and said as an agency, where are you now and what are some of the key lessons learned from such an unprecedented experience? So how are you using the experiences from the last year to help inform the path forward? So tell us a little bit about how you're thinking about that.
Yeah, I think strategy, standardization, and compassion continue to be the way we lead forward. And the reason I start with strategy is I do think the compassion in the heart of our team is something we can never take that for granted, right?
What, honey?
It does drive the work here. Folks come to St. Vincent because we're very mission focused. So ensuring that the compassion and the wellness of staff are always first and foremost. We did little things throughout the pandemic in those early months. And I think now in retrospect, maybe we got a few things right. They weren't big things. We would serve hot lunches every day to our staff because we were all like barely holding on. And our dietary staff said we could make lunch for the team as well as the children, right? So serving hot meals. Then the board came together and said, we'd like to write a note of encouragement and all pull together and give a nice Olive Garden, I think it was, gift card so staff could take a night off from cooking for their families. And then a few months later, they wrote another note and said, we'd like to do a Bob Evans gift card. And again, it's the little things that like just helping our staff say, you're human beings. We know that you bring a lot to your job. So that I think those little things matter. The strategy, being able to go back to what's important and what are the highest priorities, that will serve us well. That strategic plan never sat on a shelf. It was a living, breathing document. And we went back and intentionally pivoted and said, here's a goal that's going to be moved down because we have to move up. And we did that not only as a leadership team, but we did that very intentionally with the board. And one of the things I'm really grateful, Cheryl, to you and your leadership in the board, you asked me, I think the first 72 hours that we knew things were shutting down, like, what do you need from me, Susan? What do you need from the board? And I said, I need more of you all. It's very uncertain. It's very unclear. I need your strategy. I need your support. And, when you called Zoom meetings once a month with the entire board, it wasn't a subsection. Those first 4 months, we needed you all because we were in it so deep. We thought we were doing the right thing, but you all took us up and said, can we move this strategy lower? Can we move this? Like, what do we need to do together? And just the feeling that it was we and not just Regina and me, it was we needed that in those first few months.
Something as simple as making sure we had masks. Remember when this hit, people didn't have masks. We didn't even have masks. We were out here. Some people were able to go home, but some of us had to come in every day. So just having just something basic as we had board members' spouses or whomever sewing masks for us. And we were washing those masks out at night. And so it was very simple. We have a partner that I will forever be grateful for. I will forever remember Susan with Osteopathic Heritage Foundation. I was on a call right before the pandemic. And then so after the pandemic hit, and she said, what do you all need? as a community partner, nothing, she's not mental health, but she said, what do you need? And we were able to say, we've got to have these computers. We've got to have technology. We've got to push forward with our IT transformation. And those partners came through for us. We didn't have funds to go out and buy 100 laptops, and they weren't even readily available. But Cheryl, it really, again, I can't stress having a strong partnership with the community.
That's great. That's great. And maybe you can also touch a little bit on, one of the themes and the things that we've talked a little bit about today. And Regina, you referenced this as well, was, it wasn't 2020 wasn't just the pandemic. That's not all that was going on in the world or in our communities or in our families. And so I know that the agency is also really moving forward in terms of DEI and the committee that you formed. And maybe you can just talk a little bit about sort of the impact of 2020 and some of the unrest that we saw and how you handled that within the agency. I mean, it was both from the families that you serve, but also your associates. It was just Regina, to your point, it's not like one trauma or event ends. And
Zoom calls, I will be honest, where people cried. And that is not my personal work style, right? I don't cry at work. And I was one of those people who sometimes just cried. It was mostly around the racial unrest, the hurt, and a lot of the children we serve, right, are the kids who are dramatically, the teenagers, like being impacted by a lot of this stuff. And so creating a space where, we didn't sit there long, we didn't cry long on Zoom, but being okay, again, with being not okay and saying, like, we have to do something different. And we dug into trauma-informed care and said, we're going to use this moment with all of the, racial disparities and inequities that we live every day. And we're going to choose to do something in trauma-informed care, which is where we got to the DEI commitments. Regina, you want to talk about that work a little bit more?
Oh, absolutely. Real quick, because I know I can talk a lot, so I apologize already in advance. But one of the things that when you think about trauma, you have to think about it in the context of one's culture. You don't have the luxury of sitting and not addressing it, right? Because it is who I am in my trauma. So we looked at the whole diversity, racial equity, and inclusion. We originally thought, well, maybe we should do equity, but we weren't addressing just equity. We had to be very specific. We are addressing racial equity now. Why we had to be intentional? Because our clients, we have a high population of African-American clients coming in. They needed to feel that they were going to be okay, that they were not being judged just by coming in the building or just by talking and telling their story. They had to be given the space to be okay. Our staff coming into work had to be given the space to be okay. I had to be given the space to be okay. So Susan and I both were on the call crying at the same Zoom meeting. How ridiculous is that? But we were crying at the same Zoom meeting because of the pain and the hurt that we were experiencing. So we had to address it at that level. We had to talk about what does it mean? So we reached out again to our trauma experts. And our trauma experts reminded us, yes, you're on the right path. We have to fold it in under the umbrella of trauma-informed care. And ever since then, I've been really focusing on reminding folk, you're operating in a response environment, a trauma response environment. I am operating in a trauma response environment. So again, all those principles, that mutuality, that respect, that individuality, all those things that are necessary to truly be trauma informed, we had to make sure it was in place. So that was the why that we went into that whole committee, and we are working it. We pulled it from the ground up. We wanted representation. We wanted people to have space. Susan and I are not even on the committee. Our consultant said, you can't even be on the committee. It has to be so safe for your staff that you guys have got to trust the process. And that's what it really means. We're trusting the process. We want staff to know that we're committed to addressing diversity, racial equity, and inclusion.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Susan and Regina. I will say, and like I said, I get a special view being on the board and being the board chair, but you two, but your entire team are so inspiring, and the work that you've done is absolutely amazing. And I'm grateful to have been able to share and go through a shared experience with you and to see how you've led through that. And I think the families that you serve are incredibly fortunate because of your compassion and your commitment and the expertise that you bring. So thank you very, very much for sharing that with everyone today. And a special thank you to also to the LIFT Symposium and Columbus Business First for giving us the opportunity to speak and to share the experience today.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Cheryl, Susan, and Regina. Not sure how to follow that. I would say this session, if I were to do a leadership and strategy session for a group of leaders, I could spend a week just on this video that that you just treated us to. So we really appreciate you sharing your insights, your leadership, your passion. Really, really great session. Thank you very much, and congratulations on everything that you've done. And thank you for everything you're doing in our community. Now it's time to move on to this morning's panel discussion. Our panel will explore what individuals and organizations can do to lift each other up and rise together after one of the most extraordinary years in our lifetime. Our first panelist is DeVray Kirkland. DeVray is the Vice President, Diversity and Inclusion and Chief Diversity Officer for Cardinal Health. His key responsibilities include the development and implementation of a comprehensive enterprise-wide diversity strategy through related programs, initiatives, and projects. He also provides direction on attracting, retaining, and promoting a diverse workforce and inclusive work environment. Our next panelist is Michael Corey. Michael is the Executive Director of the Human Service Chamber of Franklin County. HSC's member agencies provide a diverse array of health and human services across the Columbus region. Before joining HSC, Michael practiced healthcare law at Bricker and Eckler and worked as a policy analyst at the Children's Defense Fund of Ohio. Please join me in welcoming Teresa Tanner. Teresa is founder and CEO of Reserve Squad, a talent solution designed to preserve a company's professional female workforce through an innovative work model. She's spent nearly 30 years in corporate America, where she has worked to deliver innovative benefits to help women succeed in the workplace and at home. Our next panelist is Sophia Fiffner. Sophia is Director of Communications for NiSource and Executive Director for the NiSource Foundation. A staunch advocate for women and girls, for over 15 years, Sophia has served as a bold change agent for sexual assault and civic engagement issues. And join me in welcoming Dr. Bernadette Melnick. Bern is Vice President for Health Promotion, University Chief Wellness Officer, Dean, and Helene Fould Health Trust Professor of Evidence-Based Practice with the OSU College of Nursing. She is recognized globally for her clinical knowledge and expertise in evidence-based practice, mental health, intervention research, and health and wellness. And moderating our panel this morning is LaShondra Baker. La is the Senior Manager of Employment Engagement at Cover My Meds. She is an award-winning communicator and a 4-time TEDx speaker performer. She is also a graduate of Cornell University's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Certification Program. Turn it over to you, La.
Thank you, Nick. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. This is an incredible way to start off a Thursday morning, and what a powerful session we've already had. Thank you so much to Susan and Cheryl and Regina for an incredible conversation this morning already. I love the 3 E's, and I think about that greatly about what we're about to talk about, you know, the event, the experience, and the effect. And I think we can all say that the last 18 months has been definitely an event that we've all experienced, and there's an effect that is lingering even to today. So I really would love to start the conversation actually with Sophia. You know, when we talked before, we really talked about as an individual that it really, the last 18 months have been particularly impactful to your life. And so I would love for you to share a little bit about what you personally were going through during the course of the last few years.
Sure. And foremost, thank you so much, La, for moderating this panel. I'm so excited to be here today. And I think we can all agree that the last 18 months, it was, as we heard from the first session, trauma-filled. And for myself, I was pregnant with my second child. You know, I come from a very mixed family. My husband's family is from Germany, and they've been in the United States for a very long time. I'm a first-generation American whose family immigrated from Jamaica. And not only the political unrest, but the social unrest, specifically around Black lives, was a really challenging thing for me to grapple with as a mother of 2 Black girls, and as an advocate for African Americans. I felt the images that I saw flashed across my screen every single day. Additionally, at the time, I had the opportunity to work for the City of Columbus in Recreation and Parks. And you know, as an organization, our mission was to connect people and to bring people together. So going through a pandemic where isolation is key and social distancing is key, it was an overwhelming experience. And I'm just glad that hopefully we're on the other end of the mountain here.
And I appreciate you thinking of that. And as you think about your little girls that are growing up now, and I think about the next generation as they've experienced this as much as we have, like, what are some of the things that you personally are thinking about and how to help your daughters get through this? And what are some things that folks can think about for the next generation of how to help them not lose faith in who we are as a society, but to feel empowered to make a change for themselves?
There's a lot of things I'm thinking about. You know, from a day-to-day standpoint, you know, I start each week with focusing on kindness, grace, and relationships, and meeting people where they're at. And I hope that with my 2 daughters, that they can take that same approach when working with people who come from diverse backgrounds. Another thing that I'm thinking about is, you know, I'm a planner, probably a morbid planner to some extent, because I think far, far, far out. And I would be remiss to not think about the financial impact that this pandemic, social, all of this is going to have on communities, but specifically Black women. You know, the Women's Fund commissioned a report in 2019 that talks about the wealth gap, and single Black women own 2 cents to the dollar for single men. And that's only exacerbated by the last year with women leaving the workforce, with Black Lives Matter, with the pandemic. And all I can think about is, what am I going to do to teach my daughters the importance of accumulating wealth? What barriers and policies am I going to advocate for within my current organization or within my community to make sure that what's happening to women right now, hopefully will be on a better trajectory when they're ready to retire or ready to buy a house or take that next step.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And I think that speaks to your leadership, not only as a mother, but also a leader in a community at one of our great organizations here in Columbus. So another great organization is Cardinal Health. And I want to talk with DeVray a little bit around some of the work that you all are doing at Cardinal Health. And one of the things you really talked about was getting your leaders through training, and you actually took a trip to the National Human Rights Civil Rights Museum. And I want you to talk a little bit about that impact that those leaders had that helped them be better equipped to work through this pandemic.
Thanks, Law, and it's a pleasure to be here. I think one of the things that's really, really important that our leaders got a chance to experience was the opportunity to make an emotional connection to this work. And I think Sophia really talked about the importance of having that connection. Before the pandemic actually shut us down in February 21st, 2020, as I can recall, we took 16 of our leaders down to Montgomery, Alabama to visit the National Peace and Justice Memorial and the Legacy Museum. And I will tell you, it's more than just a moving experience. It gave everyone an opportunity for us to bond as leadership teams, to understand the impacts that these things are having on people that we work with. It's not someone just down the street. It's not someone that's far, far away. It's someone that sits in the next cubicle from you, someone that sits down the hall from you, some of the experiences that they were going through. And for us, we were able to see history, unfiltered. And I think that's something that is also very, very important for us to be able to see it all and understand some of the things that maybe we weren't taught in school and we didn't get the opportunity to learn. And now we see it, and we see it chronologically, how it's taken place over time. And I think our leaders had a chance not only to see and gain new information, but also to self-reflect. And I think once you see things, as Maya Angelou said, once you know better, you do better. And I think that's been the big philosophy that we've had, is now that we've seen some things, now we're starting to do things differently and have a better understanding of how we can better help our teammates. So it was an amazing trip for us, and it was a great way for our leaders to really start to better understand the different challenges that different cultures face.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's the thing we heard obviously earlier in the first discussion, is really about empathy and getting to know somebody where they are and understanding, especially the intersectionality of what has happened over the last 18 months from, racial, political, socioeconomic, et cetera. So it's really good for them to dig in. And I know that you all have a huge program around allyship as well at Cardinal Health. Could you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we're really excited. It really got started with our PROUD group, which is our LGBTQ plus employee resource group. And they went on the journey to really look for allies. And I'm excited to say, I think it was yesterday, the number they had reached was 5,569 allies that they have created over the course of time here that they've been working on this last fiscal year. So a special shout out to our PROUD leadership team. But then it became, we started thinking about all of our groups need allyship, all of our groups need support, all of our underrepresented voices need those folks helping. And we realized that none of us got to where we are by ourselves, and none of us will get to where we're going by ourselves. We all need support. And so that put us on the journey of understanding how allyship is so important as we build our culture globally, but even more so, how do we make it welcoming to everybody? So that has been a push of taking everyone to the understanding of what does it mean to be an ally? What does it take to be an ally? And then taking that to the next level of how do you then become an advocate? And so we're on that journey and we are excited about that work, and we're doing it with all of our employee resource groups and multicultural communities. So it's a really exciting time for us.
I love it. Thank you so much, DeVray. Allyship and advocacy is really how we rise together. So I love hearing that you all are doing that, and that's so great. So Michael, in speaking of allyship and advocacy, your work with the Human Services Chamber is really about how do you strengthen these amazing nonprofits and charitable organizations like the St. Vincent's folks. So can you talk a little bit about how the last 18 months really impacted the work that you're doing with these organizations?
Right. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this distinguished panel. And thank you to my bosses at St. Vincent Family Services for really powerfully laying out their experience and their work, their malleability, their service over the last year. You got a perfect illustration of why I love my job so much, but also why my job and our job collectively in the health and human services sector was so challenging over the last 18 months. And what we saw was an exposure and an exacerbation of a wide range of needs. It's essentially, think of it like a flood. Usually when there's a flood, though, the waters recede, and they haven't receded. And that flood is the wide range of challenges that every subsector within the health and human services sector is trying to tackle, whether it's in affordable housing or childcare or mental health or addiction services, domestic violence, legal needs, immigration needs, and on and on and on. Every facet of the health and human services sector had to keep going per Governor DeWine's executive order of March 19th, 2020, in person without the equipment that they needed, with revenues plummeting, with staffing questionable, with the ability to access their clients in doubt, with revenue plummeting, with the ability to have fundraisers and events squashed. It was a really deeply challenging moment, but we rallied our folks virtually as quickly as we could. We started emailing our CEOs every day, trying to share as much of the fast changing information that we could. I think they're sick of me. I've continued emailing everybody once a day with stuff. But let me underscore a point that has been made. The community did absolutely rally around the sector, and not just with dollars. The dollars were pivotal. There's a reason why not one of our members, not one health and human services agency in this city closed over the last year. Find me another sector where they batted 1,000%. In terms of keeping the doors open. That was because the city and county allocated significant federal dollars and because of corporate and philanthropic partners and individual donors that kept things moving. But it was the soft contributions, the contributions of brain power, the donations of hardware, so that the technology was in place, the donations of people willing to help nonprofits strategize and figure out how to move forward. All of those things really came to be and allowed the sector to keep going through the confluence of enormous existential challenges that we faced last year. Incredible uncertainty with the stability of our federal government, incredible uncertainty with the safety of our Black and Brown communities, incredible uncertainty with the pandemic. And to be very frank with you, I'm not sure if we're on the edge of the storm, if it's passing, or if we're in the eye of the hurricane right now. I have never really felt more uncertain about what the next 6 months might hold, but I am an optimist, and I am optimistic that in this community, we're going to figure this out. But I will say, I have been inspired every day by the work that is happening within our sector and across sectors to keep folks going. And let me underscore with one illustration of that. There have been, when all of this started, as Regina noted, there weren't masks, period. We couldn't keep our folks safe without that. Over the course of the 60 months that have passed since then, we've been able to serve as a distribution channel of protective equipment to 120 health and human services nonprofits. And because of partners in business, in government, in higher ed, and health systems, and so forth, we've helped get out over 500,000 masks and 200,000 bottles of soap and 200,000 bottles of sanitizer and on, because people are just saying, here, how can we help? And that wasn't happening at the same level prior to the pandemic. And I hope that that is a new normal that we can stick with in our community. I know that we will. But we're at this moment where we're trying to figure out, how do we meet urgent needs still, because they are still abundant, but how do we also tackle the systemic needs, the causes of the cough, as it were? And I think we have this chance over the next uncertain 6 months to really figure that out and make investments here and make changes in how we live here to not only address the existing crises that we're overcoming, but also to brace for the ones that are coming down the pike for us next.
Thank you, Michael. That is incredibly powerful. And I think, one of the things you said that really resonates with me is like, is this the eye of the storm? Are we, heading for something that's a little more intense? And Teresa, I want to flip over to you, because one of the conversations that we had was that the pandemic and the social unrest and political unrest were just highlighting systems that were already broken in the early stages. So can you talk a little bit more about your experiences and the work that you're trying to work on right now?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And you're right. It's this last couple of years just really highlighted all of the weaknesses that we had in our infrastructure, all of the weaknesses we had from a social perspective, from an economic perspective, and things that were always a little bit under the surface and were very real lived experiences for a lot of people, just got highlighted. They got exploited and exposed. And whether it's childcare, before coming into the pandemic, we had a real issue with affordable quality childcare. But over the last year and a half across the nation, we've lost 26% of our childcare facilities. And we already had a shortage before the pandemic. Now we really have a shortage. And, Ohio was less than that. I think I read about 9%, but we're still even lower in Ohio than before the pandemic. So these issues that primarily women were facing trying to get to work now have just been exasperated. And, I agree with Michael, and, Michelle said earlier that it probably would take even an additional 2 years for women to regain their footing. And I think that's optimistic. I hope that's true. But we have a lot of infrastructure problems that have been highlighted, and we have to step back and really figure out, how we got here was hard, and the same things that we used in the past are not going to be the same things that we need to use in the future. And communities, workplaces, social services, we all need to think a little bit differently about the support that families and individuals need in the future. And I think the real positive thing about all of these things being highlighted last year, and there were so many things that came to the surface, right, around employment gaps, economic gaps, political gaps, racial injustices, all of those things. We've been given a unique opportunity to see things and to talk about things in a way we never have before. But it is also a call to action for us right now to take this opportunity and use this chaos as a catalyst to really propel us to a better future. And so, although I am discouraged by some of the things that we saw last year, some of the footing that we lost, I also am encouraged because I think we have an opportunity to really address these things differently. And I'm encouraged by even some of the moves that I see on a national level to enhance opportunities around childcare and things like that for families. So although we have a lot of work to do, I think that I'm encouraged that we have people that are on this call can come together and do that work.
That's awesome, Teresa. Thank you so much. And I agree, like this is all of these are representative individuals and organizations have already state claimed that they are going to be empowering our communities and our organizations to move forward. And one of the strengthening community organizations is OSU. And so Dr. Melnick has been working on some really amazing things and has some great data around health and wellness, especially, we've talked a little bit earlier about mental health and physical health is such a combination. You can't have one without the other. And you start to really see things unravel very quickly, especially when you're talking about people experiencing trauma. So Dr. Melnick, let's talk a little bit about what you all are doing at OSU and how you're seeing that the fruits of your labor is really starting to come together.
Absolutely. I left sunny Arizona 10 years ago to come to Columbus, Ohio, as the university's first chief wellness officer. Actually, it was the first CWO position at a university in the country. I want to first say self-care is not selfish. We cannot continue to pour from an empty cup. Wellness is not a nicety. It is a necessity for our organizations to thrive and be productive. And I think what the C-suite in companies all throughout the country have to make the connection. If they invest in their people's wellness, the return on investment, the value of investment is going to be huge. So Ohio State has really invested in the wellness of our people. We take a comprehensive, integrative approach to wellness. We tackle this from the top leadership to the middle managers, to the grassroots, all in building a culture that makes healthy behaviors, access to mental health treatment, the norm. That's huge. We have a philosophy: in God we trust, but everybody else better bring data to the table. And we live by that philosophy all throughout the pandemic. We did random sample surveys of our faculty, our staff, our students, to really do a pulse check on our levels of depression, anxiety, stress. What are people's needs? And we ramped up all of our program offerings. We take a preventive approach. What a lot of people don't realize is the more you invest in prevention, the better outcomes you're going to have. You'll have less chronic disease. Our country only invests 8% in prevention and wellness. So it's not surprising our health outcomes are near the bottom. So we need this paradigm shift. We wouldn't send a diver into a deep ocean without an oxygen tank. How can we send our people throughout life without equipping them with resiliency, coping, cognitive behavior skills? And we've done a really good job of that at Ohio State.
Incredible. Those statistics are mind numbing right now. It's like 8% into prevention. And you think about as a company, as a country, what we invest in really, shows where our hearts are. I want to jump to Michael for a second, because I know we talk about investment, and a lot of that comes from government regulation, legislation, etc. So I want to talk to you a little bit about, the state budget was just released a little while ago, and there were some, different levels of funding for both childcare, transportation, and some of those basic needs that can absolutely impact people's health. So can we talk a little bit about what you're learning about the budget and how you're going to start putting work toward, helping people move through those?
Right. So I'll start with saying we really dodged a bullet. The state budget that came out of the Ohio Senate took everyone in business and health and nonprofits off guard, in that it was going to functionally kneecap several critical areas to our community, to our economy, and to our health and human services sector. In terms of childcare, certainly, in terms of affordable housing, broadband, SNAP, and healthcare access. It was alarming, and we were all in the advocacy space, working with colleagues on the business side, pushing the General Assembly to reject what the Senate had put forth. And honestly, I sobbed when it came out of conference committee, because they did precisely that. They batted 5 out of 5, or at least 4.5 out of 5, on ameliorating some of the more draconian elements of the budget that came out of the Senate. And I'm really grateful to all of the work that so many did to ensure that happened, and grateful to Governor DeWine for the work that he and his team did, along with House leadership, to arrive at a budget that was more helpful than hurtful. And the budget that we almost had would have been more hurtful than helpful. With that, the challenge that we're all facing is, how do we align public policy to make lives better? And that doesn't mean we all have to be on the same philosophical side on how we do that through public policy. But there used to be some elements of public policy that were sacred and were protected, and that's no longer the case. Everything is now a partisan football, and that's not good. Trying to work with partners across sectors to protect certain elements of our governance, to ensure service delivery and give people the chance through government to get help when they need it, so that they can get back on their feet, is absolutely critical to a functioning democracy. And I think we have a chance now to continue that work with a ferocious pace, with urgency, with new perspective, and new awareness that a lot of folks didn't necessarily have prior to the pandemic. In our role at the Human Service Chamber, we work with the city, the county, the state, and the federal government, all within the Franklin County region, trying to do that. We have done that. We will continue to doing that as aggressively and thoughtfully and diplomatically as we can. But we have to do more than just meet those immediate needs with aligned public policy. And at the county level and at the city level, there's been an increased emphasis on addressing inequalities through public policy. And I think we will continue to see that happening as much as possible at the local level. But there are certain things that have a ceiling of what you can do legislatively and even through regulation at the local level. And we're going to need the state and the federal governments to find their alignment there too. And that's a challenge. That's not stuff you can do overnight. This is work that takes 50 years, and we don't have 50 years. People that are in need don't have 50 years. So how do we find ways to work with government where we can on improving public policy and increasing investments for public policy, but then also how do we circumvent it when we need to and get the work done and meet the needs that are in place if the government isn't in a position for whatever reason to be a part of that. And I'm not suggesting government is the solution to everything. Trust me, that's not what I'm trying to advocate for today. But there are areas where public policy is absolutely critical, and it can be either tremendously beneficial, it can get out of the way to let the work get done, or it can be weaponized. And too often of late, it has been weaponized against the needs that people have, and that can't be the way we govern going forward. So our role as advocates is to share as much information as we can and to call for the kind of work we think that needs to be done to make systems better, to improve lives, to eliminate inequalities, and to get us going forward and thriving. At our organization, the mantra that we have is we want to unleash the power of human potential with every act of human services that each of our members pursues. And I think that governs the work that we try to do in the advocacy space as well.
I love that, unleash the power of the human. I always talk about potential and how much opportunity people have to be able to reach their fullest potential. So I love that that's what you're doing at the Human Services Chamber. And I want to jump back over to Teresa for just a second. You know, one of the things that, you know, Michael was talking about is, you know, the advocacy piece. And I know that, you know, as we look at the great resignation that's happening across the country right now, and also knowing that women have left the workforce in droves, and sometimes it's because of childcare and other things that are that are disappearing that they need. What do you think we need to do as individuals within the community, but also as organizations in this community, to really bring attention to these issues? And what do we need to do to help our entire country move forward?
Yeah, I think we have to give voice to those who don't have voice, and we need to amplify it, and we need to give them a platform, because we can't, approach this as a one size fits all. This has been a very unique experience for everyone, and we've talked a lot about that today. And even as we think about how we support, I'll specifically talk about employees right now. As we specifically support employees, a one size approach is just not going to work. We have got to really step back, and we have all kinds of companies saying, all right, everybody back, or everybody stay home, or we'll do a hybrid. And we really just need to expand those choices and listen to people, because it's not going to happen overnight. And, that infrastructure, as we talked about, it's going to take a while to get that support. And it's, it's childcare, it's transportation, but, it could be that I lost parents during COVID. That was my support, or I now have additional mental health challenges. I mean, there's just so much complexity that we have to navigate right now. So we need to be very individualized. We need to listen, and really get those voices out there so we know how to advocate the right way. And jumping to the wrong solutions too quickly is going to extend the tail on this thing. And so we really have to be open to new ways of doing things, and really allowing our employees to help shape that and have a voice. I do think that there were a lot of silver linings last year. We talked about our need to ramp up technologically very fast, and organizations that were very behind figured it out, or workplaces that said jobs that can never, ever be done from home. Well, guess what? They were done from home. And so we have an opportunity to think differently now and really use some of those lessons and some of that very rapid advancement to our benefit going forward. But it's going to take, I agree with everything that's been said today. I mean, it's a public partnership, a private partnership. It's communities and churches and social services and employers, and, all of those voices need to come together to say, what is my part? And it's going to take everyone working in a comprehensive and coordinated fashion to help this recovery. One of the things that I worry about with women and people of color and other underrepresented groups is the demand for the jobs are coming back before the support is coming back to allow people to work. And what I really worry about is even in some of those sectors where we had good representation, are those jobs going to get skewed to a different mix in the future? And so that's a long, long tail, right? That's why I say it might be more than 2 years, you know? So how do we make sure that we are very thoughtful about that we are looking and we are understanding what's happening? I'm even encouraging organizations, look back at your performance rating history year over year. Do you see certain groups dropping disproportionately? Do you see, your talent pipeline morphing and changing over the next few years? We're going to have to be very purposeful about this and step in and intervene so that we don't wake up 5 years from now and say, oh my gosh, look what happened. Look at this huge shift. We can't afford that. And so we have to really listen, have eyes wide open, and be open to thinking differently in the future.
I love that, Teresa. Thank you so much for that insight, because I definitely believe, we have to empower our employees and leaders to take a step and do things differently, and Deborah, I want to come back to you for a second, because I know that you sent some of your leaders through unconscious bias training for this very purpose of what Teresa's talking about, to uncover some of the things that might be holding them back from helping others reach their fullest potential. Can you talk a little bit about that training and then some of the impacts afterwards?
Sure, happy to. I think over the last couple of years, we've developed in-house unconscious bias 1 and unconscious bias 2 training, and have put that out to all of our managers globally, and are really excited about not only helping people understand the awareness that we all have unconscious bias. So there's no one that doesn't have bias. We all do. It doesn't always mean that you're against something. You could have a bias for something, but understanding where you sit and how that comes into play when it comes to you mitigating, making decisions based on that bias is really critical. There are times where if you don't understand that you have a bias for something, you may make a decision that is based on that, which is not in the best interest of that individual or that company. And so you want to make sure that you're aware of it. I think for us, the awareness piece of it was critical to get out in the first year. And then we took it to the second step, which is understanding how does it affect promotions and succession planning and recruitment and hiring and those practices, which then I think to Teresa's point, talk about the bench that you have in your organization and the ability to have talent in your organization. Our goal, I think, as many other companies have, is you want the best and brightest talent, and you want that in your organization. So you have to try to mitigate ways which might prevent you from getting that, whether that's flexibility or hiring or whatever it may be. And so understanding how your bias shows up, understanding that each one of us have it and that we need to be able to deal with it, I think is critical for us. And I think we decided that that was important enough for us to put out to all of our managers and above globally as a company, and really be able to say, we want you to not only understand it, but we want you to help mitigate the negative impacts that it could have.
I love that. I think that is so important for people just to kind of dig deep and to really understand like what power they have to make that positive change. So I want to go to Sophia with that, because one of the things you really talked about is having this mixed family experience and, your own experience as a Black woman and raising Black daughters. But how do you have conversations with, white people in power, white leaders, to say, here's how you can use your power and your privilege, not as a weapon, but as an actual catalyst for change to empower others?
Sure. So I wish I could say, oh, geez, that's so easy. Here's what I do. But it's not. It's a daily struggle. And what I've come to realize is that everyone is on a spectrum with regards to their journey, and being able to have conversations about race or gender or politics. So the first thing that I always think of is my grandmother. She, and this I think is a very common grandmother thing to say, but with all her wisdom, she frequently would remind me to meet people where they're at. And when talking to people about, racial inequities, I have to understand where they're coming from, and I have to be an active listener. And oftentimes when we talk about having challenging conversations, I think we always provide advice to those who are, the outliers, who are, who would say something like, racism doesn't exist. But I think for those who are advocates who want to see change, we also have to be active listeners to understand who our audience is, to make sure that we're communicating in a way that will resonate with them and that will enact change. The other thing that I would recommend, and that I've done in my past, not only at the city, but also through the advocacy work I've done across the city, is learn with intentionality and have conversations with intentionality. As you mentioned, Lau, my family is incredibly diverse. I couldn't have the most, we are so far apart with regards to our life experiences. My parents immigrated to the South Bronx in the 80s. My husband's family has had a legacy of going to college and becoming attorneys. My dad was working at the Coca-Cola bottling factory. We have two different cultures. And we've had to have a lot of challenging conversations in our family, just like individuals have had challenging conversations at work. And what I've strived to do is to just be incredibly intentional in learning about my husband's side of the family, learning about my husband's experience, and he's done the same with me. And that approach, while with my family, is the same approach I take in the workplace as well. Because working for the city of Columbus, we have a very diverse population. We have people from all different backgrounds and experiences. And one thing that I think that the city did incredibly well, especially with the Department of Recreation and Parks, is taking time to make sure that managers and people leaders had those conversations and met their employees where they're at.
I love that. And I think that gives, kind of what Regina was talking about earlier about grace and space. When you meet somebody where they're at, then you can start that journey there and then move forward. I think it's hard for people not to sometimes let go of what has happened in the past, because unfortunately we can't change that, but we can absolutely change the present and the future and move forward where we rise together. Yes, I use it. I threw it in there, y'all. I threw it in there. So for Dr. Melnick, I do want to ask you a question. We talked about this 8% of preventative health, and knowing that we've been talking about all day that physical and mental wellness are so intertwined. What can we do as individuals, as community members, and as organizational leaders to help put more focus and attention on that preventative so we can stop some of the system and some symptomatic things that are happening because of the lack of attention to it?
Yeah, for one, I think we've got to advocate for more investment in wellness and prevention. We've got to do it with data, because evidence speaks very loudly. Currently, I am serving on the National Academy of Medicine's Action Collaborative on clinician well-being and resilience, because the National Academy of Medicine recognized back in 2017 clinician burnout, depression, and suicide was a public health epidemic that affects the quality and safety of care. So what we're doing right now is working with the C-suite across the country, because the C-suite needs to see hard data. So if we want to make a stronger case for our companies to invest in wellness. We've got to show the C-suite the data, because there's so many studies that show if we invest in this, outcomes will be much better. Turnover will be less. Presenteeism, absenteeism will be less. So making that connection is so critical for investment to occur.
It's making an investment, I know, and I know that you all have invested so much time into your organizations, into our community, and into this panel discussion this morning. I am so honored and grateful to be able to help guide this conversation and to help share insights with our audience. You know, I want to just close with some final thoughts. I would love to hear from each of you just one thing that you believe folks who are listening to this call can take the step next to move forward in how they help their communities, help themselves, or help their organizations to weather whatever the next, if we're moving out of the eye of the storm into something else, what is the next thing we can do collectively so that we can rise together? And I'll start with Sophia.
Oh, geez. So there's a lot of things that people can do. One thing that I want to expand upon is actually what Michael was touching on, political engagement. Darren Walker, the president and CEO of the Ford Foundation, shared that inequality is the greatest harm to our democracy because inequality asphyxiates hope. And I strongly believe that we need to have strong policy solutions if we're going to change the trajectory for generations. So I encourage people to become involved in local politics and state politics and policy, become advocates. I encourage people to vote and vote for women, because oftentimes when you're voting for women, they're going to vote for things that matter to everyday families, like the individuals who are watching this and participating in this event.
Awesome. Thank you, Sophia. Deborah.
I would just say one of the big things is just understanding that in order for us to make things better, we have to focus on leaning into discomfort and get more comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because it's going to be critical for us to understand that we're going to have to do things that we haven't done before because we've been a part of something that we've never been a part of before. So the idea of coming out of a pandemic and getting ourselves back on track means that we're going to have to do things that we haven't done. And so be uncomfortable with that, because I will say that as you go through it, everyone has a fear of making a mistake or doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing. I'm a chief diversity officer, and I do this all the time, and I still make mistakes. So have no fear that if you make a mistake, but you're trying to do something to help the greater good, there is going to be latitude given. And then when there's latitude given, there's also going to be gratitude given for the work that you're trying to do to help the larger population. So lean into discomfort.
Well said. Thank you, Deborah. Michael.
I think I would start with this. You don't have to be an elected official to be a public servant. You can be a public servant from whatever your job is, at whatever level of seniority you might be at. And you can manifest that in lots and lots of ways. 100% being an engaged member of the civic community is critical. But I think even if you want to work directly with health and human services nonprofits, I'll put something in the chat. It's a link to be it's an application to be considered for nonprofit board service at our member agencies. Our folks need great, committed board members that reflect our community. I'll share that with you. I'd urge all of you to consider throwing your hat in the ring. I know many of you serve on boards as it is, but put it in there, and then it'll be available to 120 nonprofits, and they'll reach out to you as they have openings commensurate with the interests and availability that you share with them there. But to that point, reach out to the nonprofits you know, and reach out to some that are doing work that intrigues you and say, I want to learn more. How can I help? And you will be amazed at the response that you will get. It will be much more than just writing a check. it will be much more than serving on a board. There's so much that you can do for so many people right now, despite whatever your day job and your night commitments might require of you.
Thank you so much, Michael. Teresa, please.
So I would just say, listen and push yourself out of your own comfort zone and ask questions that may even be uncomfortable for you, and really listen to other people's experience, and then use your voice. Use your voice to amplify others, but also use your voice to drive change. And one of the things that I just would want to say to everyone on this call is everybody does have power in their voice. And, you know, whether it's in your family, whether it's in your neighborhood, whether it's in your community, whether it's with your government, there's just such power in collective voice. And I just encourage us to use whatever power or influence or audience that we have to come together and advocate for the changes that we need.
Wonderful. Dr. Melnick, close us out.
Okay. Healthcare claims for depression and anxiety are up 3- and 4-fold. People are struggling like never before in our country. So I'm going to take a grassroots perspective. When you see somebody struggling, ask this simple question: are you okay? Are you okay? And then give them a dose of vitamin G for gratitude, like I have on my backdrop. Take a dose of vitamin G every day. It's one of the simplest evidence-based practices to reduce stress and improve mood. Lastly, I want to ask all of us today, just pick one thing, one lifestyle behavior in the next 30 days that you can get just a little better at, because people are trying to cope with COVID, with alcohol increases, unhealthy eating, decreases in physical activity. And 3 to 5 years from now, because of those unhealthy coping strategies, we're going to see more diabetes, high blood pressure, depression. So start with yourselves today. Make a commitment to take good self-care.
Well, I have just had a healthy dose of vitamin G by being here with all of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for sharing your insights and the beautiful impact you've already made. And you have a whole audience of people who have been impacted. So thank you for your time today. And I'm going to throw it back over to Nick.
Thank you, DeVray, Michael, Teresa, Sophia, Bernadette, and La for a truly thought-provoking discussion. So you've got all this that you've just taken in. There's been a lot to hear and a lot to learn in this session. Both the challenges, the triumphs, the continued opportunities, the silver linings, the dark clouds, the eye of the storm. Now it's time to share your thoughts and your ideas in small group breakouts. So in just a moment, we're going to send everyone to breakout rooms. You'll have 10 minutes to share your thoughts before we close. Once you're in your room, I'd like you to introduce yourself to your group and then discuss the following question. We already teased it. What's the one thing you are inspired to take away from today and take action on? The one thing you are inspired to take away from today and take action on. Melissa, sock it to us.
Hi, it's Stephanie again. Now I'd like to introduce you to our 2022 LIFT Symposium chairperson, Susan Moss.
On behalf of the LIFT Committee, our Columbus Business First partners, and HBA, we thank you, our participants, presenters, sponsors, and supporters for making this event possible. Since its inception 4 years ago, LIFT has sought to increase gender equity within our communities by highlighting those individuals and organizations who've demonstrated the standout leadership necessary to move us towards the goal of gender parity. We hope you found the LIFT sessions both thought-provoking and inspiring, so much so that you are personally motivated to take action within your sphere of influence. No matter how small, each positive effort you make represents a paver in our collective path forward to create a better future that benefits us all. Thanks again for investing your time with LIFT.
Well, this was a tremendous session. Once again, a big thank you to all of our speakers, all of our panelists for sharing your time with us today. Want to thank you once again, all of the members of this year's LIFT Symposium Planning Committee. I want to thank our sponsors for supporting this event and the HBA Columbus. Our presenting sponsor is Cardinal Health. Thanks to underwriting sponsor, Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center. Our brand sponsors are Cover My Meds, Ohio Health, Quantum Health, and Right Pat Credit Union. Finally, a big thanks to our event partner, the HBA. I invite you to check out Columbus Business First's print and digital coverage of the LIFT Symposium series. If you've not already, we welcome you to register for session 2 of this year's LIFT Symposium, which will be held next week. This concludes session 1 of LIFT, leveraging the impact of female talent. Thank you for attending, and we hope to see you next week for session 2. Have a great rest of your day.